way to work, just finished at the hospital, and I debated for a little bit what to talk about this morning, meaning debate within myself. And I thought, you know what? After a recent conversation, I thought this was a good topic, which is the borrower's experience, and what it means to be a borrower versus a lender, and learn what's your take on it, but certainly also just to muse a little bit about how I feel about the borrower's experience. And so what I would say is I try to avoid borrowing. And part of the reason why I try to avoid borrowing is because of how I was raised. Now, there are times when I've had to borrow, or when my mom has had to borrow to get by for us to maybe meet a certain milestone or to meet a certain deadline. But at the same time, from as long as I can remember, my mom has always recited this one verse from one of the Proverbs, and it's the borrower is servant or slave to the lender. And she'd always say that, right? The borrower is slave, servant to the lender. And there have been countless times and experiences I've certainly had in my life, either as a child watching her life or watching other people, and realizing how relationships and interpersonal relationships in particular change when a borrower-lender situation arises. And this can be in the context of money, when money is lent or borrowed. It can be when personal items are lent or borrowed. Certainly, as I come from the Caribbean, it also is the situation if you're borrowing somebody man or somebody woman, that's also a problem. But that is not what we're talking about today, right? But we're talking about other forms of borrowing and lending. And so what's important to remember, I think, as a key tenet in life for independence, for success and continued growth, is to avoid unnecessary borrowing. And I feel that way even about, finances. So credit card usage, for example, recognize that when you use your credit card, you're technically borrowing money from the credit card company. If it's a secured credit card, then you're technically borrowing from yourself, but it still has to be paid back. And I think, using the credit card banking analogy is a good one, because sometimes when we borrow from ourselves, our friends, our family, we forget that there's a certain level of accountability expected of you, the borrower, by the lender, right? The lender expects something from you. They expect accountability. They expect updates. They expect to be paid back. They expect to be paid back in a certain time frame, or they expect communication regarding if you can't meet the deadline, etc. Certainly, if you use your credit card has a due date, and if you don't pay on your due date, they start calling you. If you miss more than one due date, they're telling on you, right? They're reporting you to the credit bureaus to tell them, hey, she didn't pay, and they want other lenders to know. And I think if a lot of us remember that, we would behave the same way with each other. Because I've certainly met people and they're angry, so-and-so lent me $5 and now, they're telling everybody I haven't paid them back. Well, if they lent it to you with an expectation of repayment, and there was an expected time frame for repayment, and you either forgot, didn't do it, chose not to do it, it's within their right to report. You won't be angry if your credit card company reported you. You, I presume, won't be angry if your bank reported you for not making payment on your loan, if they wanted to make sure other banks don't loan you money because you don't pay back. So keep that in mind, right? I think if a lot of us took to our personal relationships and interpersonal interactions the same expectations that we understand society and large institutions and corporations work on, we'd actually have better relationships in many ways. And likewise, The same reason why you may choose not to borrow from the bank, because you're not sure you could pay them back. You may choose not to buy that non-essential item with your credit card because you don't think you'd be able to pay it back right now. I say take the same approach with your interpersonal relationships and interactions with people. So, maybe you see a friend and she's got a really cute handbag. Maybe she even said to you, feel free to use it anytime you want. Just ask me for it and you can use it. That's nice. But at the same time, you shouldn't abuse it. If you think you don't need that bag or whatever that item is, you can live without it. Just because it was offered to you doesn't mean you have to use it. Show some restraint, show some introspection, show some reserve, and question yourself. Really interrogate yourself as to whether or not you need this thing right now. You'd be surprised, I think, by how many relationships you can preserve, how many relationships you can salvage, even the ones where if you just took a different approach to the interaction. Even within my own family, I think I alluded to this before, but I'm very big on asking, what is it for? What is the plan here? Why are you asking for this? And it's not because I don't want to give it, but it's because I don't want people, one, I don't want them abusing me, but it's really because I also don't want them to abuse themselves, and I don't want them to get accustomed to thinking that any whimsical thought, even when it's not really necessary, can come to fruition just because I could ask this other person to lend me, to borrow. Like the people who use the term lend but have no intention of giving back. So much so that my mom came to a point in life where she'd say, I'm not lending, right? If I can give to you, I'll give, but I no longer lend, especially if it's somebody with a history of not paying back. Don't use the word lend, right? If you know you have no intention of giving back. Hi, Shawana. If you know you have no intention of giving back, stop asking people to lend you things.